Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. My name is Leon Jones, and tonight I'm going to get into something. It's more of a social topic, but you can actually fit it into politics as well because our Health and Human Services Secretary is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, he might have something to say about this. And what I'm going to talk about in this video is what is bread. Now, a lot of us eat bread. Bread comes in all different flavors, all different types, from white bread to wheat bread. However, are you really eating bread? Now, this is something to be determined. Now, I've been over to Europe a couple of times, and I'm going to tell you this. When it comes to bread, and I will tell you this, bread basically has five ingredients: salt, yeast, flour, water, and some sweetener. Salt, yeast, flour, water, and some sweetener. That is true bread. And when it comes to true bread, if it's in the store, it's got to be in a freezer section because bread molds easily, particularly if you keep it at room temperature. Now, I was actually watching a video, and shout out to my sweet chocolate for actually bringing this video up, where there was a piece of bread, and the person on the video ran water over that piece of bread. And that piece of bread was like a sponge. Once you ran the water, you could squeeze it, and water comes out of it like a sponge. Now, I'm going to go into I'm going to go into basically, let me share my screen here, and I'm going to go on some brands of bread that we normally eat that aren't necessarily good for you. And you might know some of these names of breads. Now, I've eaten this bread several times. It's King's Hawaiian round sweet bread. Of course, King's Hawaiian rolls, that's also this bread. Now, I worked in the hospitality industry for years before I became a civil engineer. And when it comes to bread, bread is not as good as it used to be when I was growing up. In fact, a lot of the bread is made not to taste good, but it's made for shelf life. So anytime you go in a store, if you look at the ingredients, and there's more than five ingredients, I just named them for you: water, yeast, salt, flour, and sweetener. And sweetener could be honey, it could be sugar. If there are more than five ingredients, you do not have bread. Bread only has five ingredients. So we're looking at King's Hawaiian round sweet bread. Now, if you look at it, it has 36 grams of sugar for men. Well, according to the American Heart Association, men require 36 grams of sugar, women 25 grams of sugar. But these are the most unhealthy store brands of bread that you should think twice before you're eating. King's Hawaiian bread. I've eaten this bread as well. Martin's sandwich potato bread. Sara Lee Texas toast. Some people use this to make French toast. Pepperidge Farmhouse hearty white bread. Now, there's some other brands out there I'm going to get to. Bimbo soft white bread. I'm not familiar with this brand, but this is Heartland Orange cranberry bread. Now, I am familiar with St. Pierre sliced brioche loaves. I've seen this in Meyer. I live here in Indiana, and if you are in the Midwest area of the United States, particularly Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, we have stores named Meyer. They're grocery stores. They carry a lot of St. Pierre products. And St. Pierre sliced brioche loaf is one of the brands that they carry. Cheesecake Factory brown bread white dinner rolls. One that I grew up with, Hostess used to make it. In fact, it was founded right here in the state of Indiana, Indianapolis to be exact, Wonder Classic white bread. La Boulangerie, super flaky croissant toast. La Boulangerie. I'm not French, but I did pronounce that right. It's La Boulangerie, super flaky croissant toast. I've never heard of it, but this is another bad store-bought brand. Freihofer's premium Italian bread. I have heard of this one. In fact, they carry it in Meyer. I also believe they carry it in Kroger. Cinnabon Bakery inspired cinnamon bread. Thomas Everything breakfast bread. Now, some of you might ask why I'm doing this. Well, the government needs to know what's in our food, and some of this food is being approved by the FDA. You see that logo right in my background. That's why I put it up there today. Then you have freshness guaranteed marble rye sandwich bread. Now, there are more breads out there, but what I want to give to you, and you're going to find it interesting, I'm going to tell you what's in this bread. And some of you who read, you might understand it. Like about 9 years ago, I did a video on Cheerios. Cheerios had trisodium phosphate in it, which they put that in detergent. Well, something you need to understand as well, there is something called glyphosate. Glyphosate. Now, what is glyphosate? Well, glyphosate is the active ingredient in the weed killer Roundup, which often ends up in bread when crops are treated with it before harvest. This practice is known as desiccation. And what happens is it speeds up drying and increases crop yield while leaving trace residues in the wheat that carry over to the flour and into the final baked loaf. So state and federal regulators enforce strict limits on pesticide residue, and independent testing confirms that these trace amounts fall below these safety thresholds. However, the presence of these chemicals remains controversial, as some health advocates and organizations argue that prolonged chronic exposure could impact gut health. Now, knowing that, what does it all mean? Have we all been eating bread like this, or they call it bread? What many of us don't do, because mainly a video like this, it would be on my other channel, but because it's health related and we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as our health and human services, and I hope he's going to tune into this, because we need to look at bread, because I tell you, one thing about bread, this is the reason why it's so high in carbohydrates, because of what they put in it. And it's more than 5 ingredients. So let me get to you again what bread really is. Now, before I get on to that, I'm going to present a video, and you need to understand, when I present the video, copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. So nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips are balanced in favor of fair use. So in other words, when I present a video, I'm presenting it for educational purposes only under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. I have it displayed on the screen for you. Now, going back in there, looking up, and I may have put it in here, I may not have put it in here, and I have it right here. A lot of windows open. Now, this is what you need to understand about bread. And I just mentioned it to you before. Bread, these are the 5 basic ingredients that are typically included in classic yeast-leavened bread. And there are flour, water, salt, yeast, and a sweetener like sugar or honey. Together they build the structure, provide flavor, and create the soft, airy texture of a traditional loaf. So these 5 basic ingredients work together to create bread, real bread. Flour. Flour is the foundation of the bread. It provides structure mainly through gluten, which traps gas produced by the yeast to help the bread rise. Water. It hydrates the flour, activates the gluten, and brings the dough together. Salt enhances flavor, tightens the gluten structure, and controls the fermentation rate of the yeast. Yeast. It's a living organism that acts as a leavening agent. It feeds on the sugars, creating carbon dioxide gas, which is CO2 if you've taken chemistry before, like I have. And that carbon dioxide gas causes the dough to rise. And then you have your sweetener. The sweetener is sugar, honey, or another sweetener. It feeds the yeast to kickstart the fermentation, and it promotes a golden brown crust during the baking of bread. Now, it tells me that maybe one of these days we should be baking our own bread again. And, with what's going on now, particularly after COVID, I believe that we need to get back in the kitchen and start making our own foods. Now, my last video, I talked about GMOs. You can go on to my second channel. It's called the QCIS channel. And I actually talked about engineered foods, GMOs. Well, sometimes when man gets their hands on something, they totally screw it up. And one thing about our health, they talk about the rate of obesity here in America. It's because we are eating a lot of foods that appear to be regulated and somehow they're getting past the FDA. Although the test might say one thing, these foods are still going out and they're being sold. So, what does all this mean? All this means is that we think we're eating the real deal here. We're eating something that is totally used to kill weeds. Some of this phosphate, it goes into a construction material called sheetrock. Now, what I'm going to do is, I haven't done it in a while. I'm going to fire up a video. Let me see if I can turn up the sound. Let me see if I can turn up the sound here. Just bear with me. I haven't done this in ages. Put on my settings here. Shared my screen here. Because what I want to give you all is a education on what's going on out here. Let me share. Let me try to get this video up. Here we go. Now, here are 10 brands that aren't the greatest. Let me share my sound here. Let me turn it on. You should be able to hear it. So, okay, just bear with me while I get it back up. I'm going to my history. So I'm going to, let me make sure you all hear it. Let's see. Well, I'm going to go ahead and play the video, and if you can't hear it, just bear with me. Fair use.
6 out of 8 came back positive for glyphosate, the active chemical in Roundup. Not on the farm. In the finished bread you're slicing and eating every single day. Here's what nobody's telling you. Some of the worst results didn't come from the cheap brands. They came from the ones with organic labels, the ones marketed to health-conscious families, the ones people pay extra for specifically because they think they're making the safer choice. One brand tested above 1,000 parts per billion of glyphosate, one of the highest levels ever recorded in a packaged consumer.
Now you see what I just mentioned? See how that bread is being run under the water? It looks just like a sponge. And because that bread looks like a sponge, that bread, because it looks like a sponge, you can squeeze that bread and water comes out, and you can take that bread and actually wash your counters off with it. Fair use. Let's get back to the video. Fair use.
Bread. You're going to recognize the name. We're counting down all 10, from concerning to genuinely shocking, and finishing with the 3 brands that came back completely clean and are actually worth buying. Let's get into it. Number 10, Great Value Whole Wheat. This is Walmart's house bread, the one that fills carts because it's cheap, familiar, and always in stock. Before you open it, try something. Press on the bag. It doesn't feel like bread. It compresses completely and bounces straight back, like a foam cushion shaped into a loaf. That's your first clue that something engineered is happening inside. The Detox Project and the Environmental Working Group found 340 parts per billion of glyphosate in Great Value whole wheat through independent laboratory testing. Regulators will tell you that's legal. The EPA's ceiling for glyphosate on wheat is 30,000 parts per billion, but that number was calculated for one chemical in one food for one healthy adult in isolation. It was never designed to account for someone already on blood pressure medication, already getting glyphosate from their morning cereal and afternoon crackers, now adding it again at dinner. Exposure stacks. The regulatory math doesn't. Walmart generated over $713 billion in revenue last year. Sourcing cleaner grain isn't a financial constraint at that scale. It's a margin decision. The 80 cents you saved came with something extra that was never listed on the label. Budget price. Contaminated grain, and the next brand costs significantly more and delivers the exact same problem. Number 9. Market Pantry Organic. This one surprises people. Target spent years positioning itself as the smarter, cleaner alternative. Better design, more intentional sourcing, the store young families choose because it just feels different. Their Market Pantry whole wheat sandwich bread carries a USDA organic seal. It tested at 348 parts per billion of glyphosate in independent laboratory testing. Higher than Wonder Bread, higher than Nature's Own. An organic loaf, outscoring conventional bread in contamination. Here's how that happens. It's called drift contamination. When a conventional farm adjacent to an organic operation sprays herbicide, the mist doesn't stop at the fence line. It travels. The USDA organic certification verifies that the producer didn't intentionally apply glyphosate. It does not verify that none arrived from a neighboring field. Drift testing isn't required. Target doesn't publish it. A parent reaches for this loaf specifically to protect their kids. They pay the premium. They see the seal. The certification is legitimate. The contamination is also legitimate. The law that would require anyone to disclose the gap between the two simply doesn't exist. Organic label, 348 parts per billion. No required disclosure. That's not consumer protection. That's a hole the industry has quietly decided to leave open. Number 8. Wheat Organic. This is the craft brand that quietly stopped being one. 2 families started baking bread together in Los Angeles in 1932. They called it wheat. For decades, it was a genuine regional institution. Family-owned, California-made, quality focused.
And I want to give a shout out to the name of this channel. It's called Consumer Exposed. Now, what I want to get to you is a lot of us see fat-free, we see organic, and we think it's good. When a number of these organic foods, now, these so-called breads out here, these are supposed to be the more healthy breads like Oro wheat and Nature's Own. But see, what they do is they put something in the seeds, and that's that glyphosate. And again, I just told you that glyphosate is also in Roundup. If you're not familiar with Roundup, Roundup is weed killer. But as the video goes on, you're going to be surprised of more of the brands. I called out a few brands earlier, but I'm just backing it up with this video. And I have to pause it every 3 minutes so I can put in my narrative. And also, I don't want to get a copyright strike on my channel as well. So, again, this video is for educational purposes only. So, I'm going to say this: fair use, but shout out to the channel, Consumer Exposed. Like, share, and subscribe to that channel. Fair use. Let's go.
In 2009, Grupo Bimbo acquired it. Since then, Bimbo has also absorbed Arnold, Sara Lee, Entenmann's, Thomas, Ballpark, and dozens more. One multinational now controls what most shoppers still believe are independent, competing brands. When Bimbo absorbs a brand, the supply chain follows. Same flour suppliers, same wheat sources, the same grain potentially pre-harvest treated with glyphosate as a desiccant across their broader industrial network. The Environmental Working Group reported 70 parts per billion of glyphosate in Oro wheat whole grains, 100% whole wheat, back in 2018. Bimbo reformulated certain products after those results went public. There has been no publicly available independent glyphosate testing on Oro wheat organic since. The last number on record is still 70 parts per billion. From 2018, Bimbo generates $22 billion in annual revenue. If they're testing every batch, they haven't published the results. Longtime customers describe the pre-acquisition bread as denser, grainier, more varied in texture. What's on shelves today is uniform soft and engineered to hold that softness through a long retail window. You're paying for the logo. Everything else was replaced years ago. Number 7. Nature's Own. Flowers Foods is one of the largest bread companies in America, $5 billion a year in revenue. Nature's Own is their flagship, and the name is doing a lot of work. Natural. Wholesome. A bread that implies it came from somewhere intentional. In February 2026, Florida's Department of Health tested Nature's Own butter bread. The result, 190.23 parts per billion of glyphosate. Their perfectly crafted white came back at 132.34, but the glyphosate is only part of the story. Read what else is in the loaf. Calcium propionate, a preservative that peer-reviewed research has connected to behavioral effects in children. Datum, a chemically modified fat used to strengthen dough structure. Sodium stearoyl lactylate, an emulsifier that maintains engineered softness for weeks past any natural freshness window. Squeeze the bag. That pillowy give isn't freshness. It's a formulation. In 2025, a video spread widely online showing someone filling a single slice of Nature's Own with water, wringing it out completely, and walking.
This is exactly what I told you earlier. This bread that water is being run through is equivalent to a sponge. You look at the water as it runs through this bread, and that bread isn't breaking apart at all. It's soaked, but it's very, very spongy. Fair use. Let's continue.
Watching it spring back to its original shape without tearing. That's not bread. That's a sponge, shaped into a loaf. In July 2025, a class action lawsuit was filed in California federal court, alleging that Flowers Foods falsely markets certain Nature's Own products as containing no artificial preservatives, while ascorbic acid appears on the ingredient label. Flowers has denied the allegations. At $5 billion in annual revenue, cleaner sourcing isn't out of reach. It just compresses the margin. And margin is what gets protected. If this loaf is in your kitchen right now, you know what you've been eating. If this investigation is already changing how you look at your bread aisle, you're about halfway through. The next few brands are where things get more serious, including a premium organic label with no published test data at all. Number 6. Arnold Organic. Arnold has been on American shelves since 1940. When the organic line launched, health-conscious shoppers saw it as the answer, a legacy brand finally living up to its reputation. USDA Organic on the front, whole grains listed first, the combination that signals trust without requiring further investigation. Arnold is owned by Bimbo Bakeries USA, same parent company as Oro Wheat, same $22 billion industrial operation. Here's the specific problem. Sara Lee has been independently tested for glyphosate. Nature's Own has been tested. Dave's Killer Bread has been tested across multiple years by multiple independent labs. Arnold Organic, from the same parent company that owns all of them, has no publicly available glyphosate test results that we could locate anywhere. We're not claiming Arnold's numbers would match Sara Lee's worst result. We can't make that claim because the data simply doesn't exist publicly. What we can say is that Bimbo's track record across every other brand they control makes this silence difficult to explain. They paid for the organic certification. They haven't shown you what that certification actually delivers. The ingredient list adds context. Organic soybean oil, organic cane sugar, cultured wheat flour, ascorbic acid. These are not the components of traditional bread. The slices are geometrically uniform. The texture holds for weeks at room temperature. Real bread doesn't behave like that. Arnold carries a 2.4-star rating on major consumer review platforms. Shoppers report bread that's dry on first opening, declining quality year over year, and a price that keeps rising. 85 years of brand equity. No public test data. That combination isn't reassurance. It's a question the company has decided you don't need answered. Number 5. Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread doesn't claim to be organic. It claims to be the American family staple, the loaf your grandmother trusted, the one that belongs on every kitchen counter. Florida's Department of Health tested Wonder Bread Classic White in February 2026. 173.19 parts per billion of glyphosate. Now read the ingredient label alongside that number. Calcium sulfate, the same compound used in construction drywall. Sodium stearoyl lactylate, monocalcium peroxide. Enriched bleached wheat flour, stripped of nutrients, bleached, then fortified with synthetic vitamins to replace what the processing took out. A loaf in the store, it collapses to almost nothing, then fully recovers. That behavior is the ingredient list expressing itself physically. Wonder Bread is owned by Flowers Foods, same parent company as Nature's Own, same supply chain. The long-term math matters here. 2 slices a day for 40 years is close to 30,000 individual servings. That's breakfast toast, lunch sandwich, and the bun at every backyard cookout. For 4 decades. Exposure accumulates the same way. Here's something worth knowing. Your body begins reducing its chemical load as soon as you stop adding to it. The next clean slice matters more than every contaminated one behind you. But Wonder Bread sold you a grandmother's kitchen and delivered something she wouldn't have recognized as food. Number 4. Sara Lee honey wheat. Sara Lee has been in American kitchens for 70 years. Birthday cakes, holiday desserts. Honey wheat is their sandwich loaf. Honey in the name, wheat on the label. Warm golden packaging that signals something wholesome and carefully made. Florida's Department of Health tested Sara Lee honey wheat in February 2026. The result? 191.04 parts per billion of glyphosate. The highest single reading in Florida's entire testing round. Higher than Wonder Bread in that same lab. Higher than Nature's Own, Sara Lee posted the worst number in Florida's published data. Sara Lee is owned by Bimbo Bakeries USA, acquired in 2011, same parent company as Oro Wheat and Arnold. Read the label carefully. Honey is in the product name, corn syrup is in the ingredients. One is marketing, the other is what's actually sweetening the bread. Keep reading.
So what we generally have here is a monopoly by Bimbo, Oro Wheat, Arnold, Sara Lee. And again, they're all run by the same supply chain. And as we go through a number of these breads, what's always missing? Test results. So I would have to ask the question, did they actually run a test? How much did they pay for a certification to get through the FDA? How often is this bread really being inspected, or is it being inspected? Because what you're looking at here, and this is the problem with a number of corporations, the bigger they get out of control. So there is no quality control. Furthermore, the individuals who are investing into these companies, which they're publicly owned companies, publicly traded companies, the stockholders. So if you really look at everything, it's not about health, it's about bottom line. They want to protect their margin. And it is dangerous because a number of these individuals who have all the money, I bet you they know what's going on. This is why they hide all the results. And this is why I'm bringing you a video like this, so you know exactly what you're looking at when you go into the store. Just because something says organic, it does not rightfully mean that it's organic. And the biggest area that most people miss is the label. I just explained what's in the label. Water, salt, yeast, flour, and sweetener. That's traditional bread. And again, traditional bread, you cannot store it in room temperature. Can't. Also, this bread, they're looking at shelf life. This is why you can keep a loaf of bread in your refrigerator. Because don't get me wrong, this bread also will mold after a certain time, depending on the outside temperature, because that humidity can come into your house. Because I've had bread and it molded after a couple of weeks. But basically, keep the bread at room temperature or a little below room temperature, it's going to last a long time. However, is it good to eat? That's the question. Why didn't we know about this? Bottom line, I have to go back and look at the individuals and they're giving you big numbers out here. Billion, not million, but billion. It's about the bottom dollar. Fair use. This video is for educational purposes only under the Copyright Act of 1976. Let's continue. Fair use.
And you find calcium sulfate, the drywall compound again, alongside monoglycerides and datum. For anyone managing type 2 diabetes, that formulation is actively working against blood sugar control with every slice. In early 2025, a video spread widely showing Sara Lee bread sitting at room temperature for over 3 months with no visible mold. Week after week, unchanged. Bread that refuses to spoil was designed for a warehouse shelf, not a human body. Highest glyphosate reading in-state testing. A sweetener that contradicts the brand name. 70 years of trust. Sitting on top of this, the next brand charges a premium for heritage it stopped honoring a long time ago. We're getting close to the brands that will genuinely surprise you. Number 3 in particular, a product many people consider the healthiest option in the aisle. Stay with us. Number 3, Pepperidge Farm. The red bag, the old-fashioned lettering. The name that sounds like a property with a stone wall and a kitchen garden. Pepperidge Farm has been baking since 1937. It's the bread people reach for when they want something that feels a step above everything else on the shelf. Pepperidge Farm is owned by the Campbell Company, over $10 billion in annual revenue. Independent laboratory testing found 587 parts per billion of glyphosate in Pepperidge Farm 100% whole grain whole wheat bread. Their Jewish rye and pumpernickel deli swirl tested at 531 parts per billion, nearly 3 times what Nature's Own recorded in Florida's testing. Worth noting, Pepperidge Farm Farmhouse Hardy White showed no detectable glyphosate in Florida's February 2026 testing. The brand isn't uniform across all products, but their whole grain and rye lines are among the most contaminated branded breads in any independent testing we reviewed. The reason is specific and worth understanding. Glyphosate is used as a pre-harvest desiccant. Some conventional farmers spray Roundup directly onto standing grain crops to accelerate drying before harvest. That final application, happening days before collection, concentrates residues directly in the outer hull of the kernel. Whole wheat bread retains that hull. Product marketed as the healthier choice can carry higher contamination than white bread made from flour that stripped the outer layer away. Choosing whole grain, in this case, sometimes means choosing more exposure. The manufacturer of glyphosate, Bayer, which acquired Monsanto, has paid approximately $11 billion to settle nearly 100,000 lawsuits filed by people who developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In February 2026, Bayer proposed a further $7.25 billion.
And that is the same Bayer that makes aspirin. Bayer aspirin. So you see these big companies. That's a pharmaceutical company. It's even put that glyphosate in the bread as well as the farmers. You heard the word Roundup. Roundup is a weed killer. So, if you're going to go shopping for bread, understand that all this education. Now, of course, you can't always believe what you read, but the bottom line is you're not getting the freshness of the bread. Now, this has happened a long time ago, that they took all the good ingredients out. It's not like your grandmama's bread. This is why we need to go back into cooking all of our food. Now, what's the Health and Human Service Director going to say about this? Because we're getting something that is called bread, but it isn't bread. Fair use. Let's continue.
$1 billion settlement for current and future claims. Bayer continues to deny that glyphosate causes cancer. Pepperidge Farm carries a 2-star rating on major consumer platforms. Shoppers report a chemical off-taste, noticeable quality decline, and shrinkflation that reduced loaf weight from 22 ounces to 14, while the price held steady. You are paying a heritage premium for grain sourced the same way as every other industrial brand on this list. Number 2. Dave's Killer Bread. This is the brand health-conscious shoppers reach for with complete confidence. Bold graphic packaging, dense, seedy loaves, a founder's redemption story on every bag. USDA organic certified, non-GMO project verified. Nutritionists post about it. Trainers recommend it. It's in millions of kitchens right now because the people who bought it genuinely believe they've already solved the bread problem. Then the lab results came back. The Alliance for Natural Health found 136 parts per billion of glyphosate in Dave's Killer Bread whole wheat. Florida's Department of Health found 11.85 parts per billion in their white done right variety and 10.38 in their 21 whole grains and seeds. Those numbers are lower than the conventional brands.
Now, if you look at this loaf of bread, it tells you one slice, but look at all the ingredients in this bread. This is what you should be eyeing. Eye the label. And under this label, it's going to tell you the ingredients. A lot of people don't read the ingredients. This is where they come up short. This is why we have a number of health issues in America, because we're actually getting something that we think is healthy. And you notice all the breads that they've talked about, haven't talked too much about white bread. It's all wheat bread, multi-grain, organic bread, to make you look like these companies know people's buying habits, but they don't. They think they're giving people a bargain, when in essence, they're not giving them real bread, but the price is high. As I told you before, they're about the margin. They're about getting rich. They're not about health. You have to understand about bread as well. You can taste the yeast when it comes out of the oven. It's just like the other day, I went to the farmer's market and got a Ben soft pretzel, which is considered bread. But it had the yeast in it. You can taste the sweetness. You can taste the freshness. And it didn't bounce back. That's what you need to understand about bread. And we've always been told, if you go to the store and the bread is getting past its expiration date, can you squeeze it? Well, we used to squeeze Wonder Bread. That was a big line. Can you squeeze it? Well, when you squeeze Wonder Bread, it bounces right back like it's rubber. And see, we didn't know all this because there's no information, and then a lot of people don't pay attention. But start paying attention. It's actually going to help you buy better food. Now, there are some decent breads, and they're coming up in this video, but I want you to understand that just because something says organic, fat-free, it doesn't mean it is good for you. Fair use. Let's continue.
That's the precise issue. Lower is not the same as zero. A brand that has built its entire identity on being the gold standard of organic bread and charges that price to match has made a specific promise. Not a close call. A broken promise. You are not paying a premium for almost better. Flowers Foods acquired Dave's Killer Bread in 2015 for $275 million. Distribution expanded almost immediately from a regional Pacific Northwest operation to nationwide scale through Flowers' direct-to-store delivery network. The founder story stayed on the bag. The industrial supply chain moved in quietly behind it. Dave's Killer Bread is owned by Flowers Foods, the same $5 billion corporation that owns Nature's Own and Wonder Bread. Same parent company, same sourcing infrastructure. The packaging looks independent, the ownership structure isn't. In September 2024, a class action lawsuit was certified in California federal court, alleging that the company misleads consumers about the protein content on the front labels of their Good Seed and 21 whole grains and seeds varieties. Flowers Foods has denied the allegations. Consumer reviews include complaints about texture drier than crackers and documented confusion about whether the sprouted grain claims reflect what's actually in the loaf. Some people buy Dave's Killer Bread because it's the only bread their body tolerates. That makes the gap between what this brand promises and what the lab found more serious, not less. The story on the bag sells the product. The lab results describe what's inside it. And that brings us to number 1, the brand that made us question whether any label in the bread aisle means anything at all. Number 1, 365 by Whole Foods. Amazon owns Whole Foods. Whole Foods sells 365 brand organic bread. Independent laboratory testing found glyphosate at 1,040 parts per billion in 365 whole wheat sandwich bread. 1,040 parts per billion. That figure appears near the top of every independent test database of branded consumer bread we reviewed. Whole Foods built their identity around what they refused to sell. Bromated flour? Banned. Artificial colors? Banned. Acrylamide? Banned. Their published list of unacceptable ingredients contains over 80 substances. Every part of the store experience communicates one message. Here, the standard is different. The test result doesn't match the message. Amazon acquired Whole Foods in 2017 for $13.7 billion. Since then, multiple former executives have spoken publicly about what changed internally. Errol Schweitzer, a former vice president who spent 14 years at the company, is among those who have publicly described a more centralized, more industrialized supply chain replacing the sourcing philosophy Whole Foods was built on. Decisions driven by logistics metrics rather than ingredient standards. Reviews of 365 bread consistently describe dry texture, heavy crumbling, and slices structurally closer to cardboard than to bread. Multiple shoppers report holes large enough to make the loaf useless for sandwiches. The industry's response is predictable. They'll point out that 1,040 parts per billion is still below the EPA's legal ceiling of 30,000. What they won't mention is the 2015 King's College London peer-reviewed study showing that ultra-low doses of Roundup, below the levels regulators currently measure for human food, produced measurable changes in gene expression across thousands of transcripts in the livers and kidneys of laboratory rats. Not industrial doses, not occupational exposure. Ultra low, below what the current regulatory system even tracks. Those tolerances were designed for a healthy adult in their 30s consuming one chemical from one food. Not for someone in their 70s managing blood pressure, cholesterol, and thyroid medication simultaneously, adding bread residues on top of cereal, crackers, and pasta across the same afternoon. You did everything right. You paid the premium, you chose the store with the reputation, you picked the house brand organic loaf because you trusted what the store stood for. The laboratory found 1,040 parts per billion of weed killer in it. If the retailer that built its entire brand on refusing to compromise cannot keep its own bread clean, what does that tell you about everything else in that aisle? Now that you know what to avoid, here are the 3 that actually held up. These aren't consolation picks. They're brands that test their products, publish the results, and source their grain differently from the ground up. Best option number 3, Food for Life, Ezekiel 4-9. Start with something most people don't know. There is no flour in Ezekiel bread. None. Food for Life sprouts 6 organic whole grains and legumes: wheat, barley, millet, lentils, soybeans, and spelt, then bakes them slowly at controlled temperatures to preserve nutritional density. This isn't a reformulated industrial loaf with better marketing. It's a fundamentally different process. Food for Life carries the biochecked non-glyphosate certified seal. This certification doesn't verify a process, it verifies a result.
And I actually listed Ezekiel bread. Now, you can find this bread in the freezer section. But what was very puzzling, prior to Ezekiel bread was Whole Foods. Now, Whole Foods has a good reputation. It's an international company. I did not know that Amazon bought Whole Foods. And 365 is a Whole Foods brand. Now, it's funny when I watch shows like Top Chef and they have breads and they have foods, where are they shopping? At Whole Foods. Whole Foods claims to have the healthier foods. But if you look at what you just saw in this video, well, Whole Foods isn't living up to its name. But is it really Whole Foods or is it Amazon? See, Amazon was not known for any type of groceries. But what Amazon wanted to do is they wanted to compete with Walmart. Because Amazon now has some of its own grocery stores. I know in Chicago, they have their own grocery stores. Indianapolis has a store now. They want to do everything that Walmart does, great value. That's also a Walmart brand. That was on this list as well. So when you look at this Ezekiel bread, you can see USDA organic, non-GMO, wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, low glycemic, and it's flourless. It is no preservatives. This is natural grain bread. Now, it costs more, but this bread is actually safe. And this is one of the three that I also listed. And if you look at Food for Life, they actually stand by their brand. Now, the other breads that you saw, what stood out was the packaging. Packaging, particularly with the colors and the font, that can get people to buy that bread. They can put the message on it that this is fat-free, this is organic. Because one thing about Americans, many of us don't check anything. We believe just about everything. This is why we have an issue with the mainstream media. Because when you have a public who's very lackadaisical about research, well, what do we have? We have companies that are lying to the American public just to get their money. And in the end, we as a civilization suffer. We pay more for something that isn't really healthy. Fair use. Let's continue.
Glyphosate residues in the finished product are undetectable at the laboratory's detection limit. That's the standard every brand on the avoid list should be held to, and isn't. Ezekiel bread scores approximately 36 on the glycemic index. White bread typically scores 70 or higher. For anyone managing blood sugar, that's a meaningful difference, not a minor one. The ingredient list has 11 items, all recognizable as food. No added sugar, no preservatives, no dough conditioners, no compounds with construction applications. Food for Life has been family-owned and baking in Corona, California since 1964. No multinational acquisition, at least not yet. One honest preparation, the texture is nothing like the breads on the avoid list. Dense, chewy, hearty. Most people find it best toasted. Look for it in the freezer section, not the bread aisle. Without preservatives, this loaf molds at room temperature. That's not a flaw. That's proof you're holding actual food. Best option number 2, 1 Degree Organics. 1 Degree does something almost no other bread brand in America bothers to do. They publish the farm source for every single ingredient. Scan the QR code on the bag and trace the wheat back to the specific field where it was grown. Not the country, not the region, the farm. 1 Degree carries the biochecked, non-glyphosate certified seal and, according to the company, submits random product samples to accredited third-party laboratories every month. No regulation requires this. No law demands it. They do it because testing the product and publishing the results is the only way to actually prove what you're selling. The ingredient list: organic sprouted whole wheat, water, organic whole grain oats, organic cane sugar, yeast, sea salt, organic cultured wheat. That's everything. No.
Now, you saw those ingredients there, as I can go back.
Demands it.
And
They do it because testing the product.
Watch these ingredients, and they're ingredients that I mentioned for bread. Yeast and sugar, wheat, they're the big ingredients. Fair use. Let's continue.
And publishing the results is the only way to actually prove what you're selling. The ingredient list: organic sprouted whole wheat, water, organic whole.
All right. These are all of the ingredients that they've mentioned. And again, test results. Now, the reason why they're tested, because they have a reputation. This bread here, and there hasn't been any acquisitions. A lot of the old companies like Wonder, Nature's Own, they're all Arnold, they're all owned by Bimbo. So what you're getting with those other breads, you're getting what we call a deception there. They look like they're independent companies, but they're actually the same company. And that's the issue, because they all use the same supply chain. So when you go and buy bread, it's like beer, okay? I'll give you an example, like Bud. They had a Bud Light, they had a Bud, they had a Red Wolf malt liquor. Malt liquor was at the highest price. But you have to look at all of the ingredients. And here are all the ingredients right here. That's what makes the bread. And they send in test results. Now, test results aren't required, and that's an issue. That means these companies can get away with selling us a bad product. Fair use, fair use. Not much longer in this video, but I wanted to touch on it for you so you can get some education. Because this is also, we talk about politics, we should be arguing about this as well. Because this is part of our everyday eating. A lot of us eat bread. And since COVID, like the quality of food has gone down, but the prices haven't. Because again, big companies, they're about acquisition and profit margin. Fair use. Let's continue.
Whole grain oats, organic cane sugar, yeast, sea salt, organic cultured wheat. That's everything. No datum, no calcium sulfate, no monoglycerides. Open a bag and the grain smell is immediate. The texture pulls apart instead of compressing and springing back. It tears. It behaves like something baked, not engineered. Distribution is still limited. You may need a natural grocery store or a direct order. That inconvenience is real. And it's also what happens when a brand hasn't handed its supply chain over to a $5 billion industrial operator. Best option number 1, Silver Hills Sprouted Bakery. If Ezekiel's density is a significant texture adjustment, or you want a clean everyday sandwich loaf you don't have to think twice about, Silver Hills is the most practical recommendation on this entire list. Silver Hills is a Canadian family-owned company. All products carry the biochecked, non-glyphosate certified seal, with residues verified below laboratory detection limits on an ongoing basis. When the WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015, Silver Hills publicly stated that classification shaped their sourcing standards. That's a company responding to evidence rather than lobbying against it. Their loaves deliver fiber, whole grains, and protein per serving. The Omega Amazing variety is a verified source of omega-3 ALA relevant for heart health. The full lineup is plant-based, nut-free, non-GMO verified, and certified vegan. In the United States, available at Sprouts, Whole Foods, and other natural grocery chains. In Canada, at Loblaws, Metro, and major national chains. Every batch tested, every result verified, no corporate parent running a margin calculation that overrides the sourcing standard. Reviewers consistently place Silver Hills among the best sprouted grain breads available. One customer, with a documented wheat sensitivity, noted her body tolerates Silver Hills when nearly every other wheat product causes her problems. And unlike Ezekiel, the texture is hearty but soft enough for a sandwich straight from the bag. The most approachable clean option for anyone making the switch without wanting to rethink what bread feels like. The price is higher than the brands on the avoid list. Availability depends on your region. Both trade-offs are real. They're also the natural result of a company that tests every batch and sources exactly what it promises. Before you close this, here's the one rule worth keeping. Stop buying bread sold at room temperature with more than 5 ingredients on the label. That single rule removes almost every brand from the avoid list from your cart. No ownership research required, no lab data to memorize. In the store, flip the bag, count the ingredients. Real bread is flour, water, salt, yeast, and perhaps a small amount of healthy oil. 5 ingredients. Everything beyond that was added to extend the shelf, simulate freshness, or reduce sourcing cost. Look past the USDA or...
Well, actually, it would be 6 because sweetener is also part of the bread. Now, I'm talking about real sugar and real honey. Because even some of that honey that you're getting out there, although this is not about honey, that's refined. That's not the honey that comes with the bee's nest or the honeycomb. So when you really look at your food, this should not come to a surprise. And what was mentioned in this video a few times was corporate profit margin. That's why we have bad products. Because companies really don't care about themselves. Now, it's not the company, it's the personnel. But remember, you have a number of personnel who invest in these companies. They make money off of the stocks, the dividends. Because I guarantee some of these individuals buying that bread, probably not. Well, my job here on the 401 Talk Zone radio show is to keep you educated. And I wanted to let you know that where's the government involved in this? The government wants to be involved in every aspect of our lives, but somehow this one slipped right through the cracks. Fair use. Let's close out this video.
Organic seal when you see it. It verifies that glyphosate wasn't intentionally applied. It does not verify that glyphosate isn't in the finished product. Two certifications that require actual laboratory testing of the finished loaf are biochecked, non-glyphosate certified, and non-GMO project verified. One is a promise about the process. The other, two, are proof about the result. Buy from the freezer section when you can. Bread that survives weeks at room temperature was built for the supply chain. Bread that hardens or molds in a few days was built for you. If you bake at home, apply the same standard to your flour before it goes in the bowl. Clean bread costs more, roughly 50 cents a slice at the high end. That is still considerably less than managing long-term health conditions that accumulate from decades of daily contamination you were never told about. In the European Union, pre-harvest glyphosate application is heavily restricted. In the United States, it remains standard practice. The residues it leaves behind sit on shelves next to organic certifications that were never designed to catch them. The labels were built to earn your trust without earning it. Now you know how to see through them. If this changed how you think about what's in your bread, passing it along to someone who buys these brands regularly is probably the most useful thing you can do with it.
Well, I did mention that to you earlier, that bread in Europe is much better. See, they don't regulate that glyphosate here. In Europe, it's regulated. That's why when you get a lot of their bread, it's actual bread. And one thing that they do, like I said, I've been in Europe, they have a lot of markets. They actually have a lot of bakeries where they bake their bread and they serve your bread. Here, the bread is basically made for the supply chain, shelf life. And as you heard in this video, one company, Bimbo, owns a number of brands. And what's troubling is one company that has a lot of brands actually, they're putting it out there that these are independent when they're not independent, because they're under the same organization and they're under the same supply chain. So overall, when we get to what is glyphosate in bread, it's the active ingredient in the weed killer Roundup, which often ends up in bread when crops are treated with it before harvest. This process is known as desiccation. What it does, it speeds up drying and it increases crop yield while leaving trace residues in the wheat that carry over into the flour and the final baked loaf. Now, state and federal regulators enforce strict limits on pesticide residue, and independent testing confirms that these trace amounts fall far below the safety thresholds. However, the presence of these chemicals remains controversial, as some health advocates and organizations argue that prolonged chronic exposure could gut health. Now, again, it all comes down to test results. There's no data. They didn't want you to know what the test results were. So without data, the government has allowed them to buy certifications. They put on the bread telling you that there's no issue when there really is an issue. Because when it comes to anything, inspection, it's quality control. And when there are no test results, I have to ask, well, how does the government let these companies get away with a bad product? Well, as I told you before, and I was going to tie it into politics, a lot of your politicians, a lot of your agencies, have been bought. when it comes to money, there's no honesty involved in money. People want the money. So they don't care about the product. They don't even care about the person. This is why when you have individuals talk about government health care. Well, that doesn't even work because you're going to have individuals who are going to be waiting in line, and what they believe is important might not be important to the government. So what's going to happen with even government health care here in the United States, particularly the elderly, they're going to let them pass away. That's what they're going to do. Because if you tie the bread, which is food, which equals health, well, you have some of your rich people, Jeff Bezos, who now owns, believe it or not, this was not called out in the mainstream media. Jeff Bezos owns Whole Foods. He also owns the Washington Post. You don't hear the mainstream media talking about this. Why? Because it doesn't serve their narrative. They've been bought and paid for as well. Let me share my screen again, because I want you to know what 5 ingredients are actually in bread. Now, of course, you could say 6 because of some oil, but these are the 5 basic ingredients typically included in classic yeast-leavened bread. There are flour, water, salt, yeast, and a sweetener like sugar or honey. Or if you don't have the sweetener, you can put a little oil in there, maybe olive oil. Together, they build the structure, provide flavor, and create a soft, airy texture of a traditional loaf. Now, these 5 simple ingredients work together to create what we know as bread. You have your flour, the foundation of the bread. It provides structure, mainly through gluten, which traps the gas produced by the yeast to help the bread rise. You also have water that hydrates the flour. It activates the gluten and brings the dough together. Then you have your salt. It enhances flavor, tightens the gluten structure, and controls the fermentation rate of the yeast. Then you have your yeast. It's a living organism that acts as a leavening agent. That's a leavening agent. And that leavening agent, what it does, it feeds onto the sugars and it creates a carbon dioxide gas, which is CO2, that causes the dough to rise. Now, again, we can't breathe in carbon dioxide, but carbon dioxide gas, well, it causes the dough to rise from the yeast. And then we have oil, but I'm going to utilize sweetener. Sugar, honey, or another sweetener feeds the yeast to kickstart fermentation, and it promotes a golden brown crust during baking. Now, again, I like to say shout out to, because I always want to put the channel out there. We're going to say shout out to this Consumer Exposed channel. This is the video right here. 10 U.S. bread bans to avoid. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to post the link to that video in my comment section, just in case you didn't hear it when I provided the video, because it's important that you understand what's going on. No, this video tonight wasn't my typical politics, but there was some politics involved. And again, with these companies out here, they also have the lead, lies. They feed your emotions. They make assumptions and they utilize delusion and deception. And in the end, when you don't understand what's going on, you end up being a victim of circumstance. In other words, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. Because bottom line, you don't have to go to school to be educated. Common sense has eroded in this country for feelings and even for food. What you might believe is good really isn't good, no matter if it says fat free or organic. It still has the same ingredients. They may add substitutes to make it taste like the original. That's what they do in soda. But in the end, when it comes to bread, if it doesn't have the 5, 6 ingredients, yeast, salt, water, flour, sugar, and or some oil, then it isn't bread. And what you're doing, you're eating a sponge. And that sponge is for the shelf life of what we call bread. Furthermore, it's also for the supply chain because there's a monopoly with the bread. And we're being deceived that all of these brands are different when they're under the same umbrella of Bimbo. And being under the same umbrella, what has happened is they've been put together by acquisition. Now, at one time, they actually had a reputation. Probably here in the 21st century, we had a lot of acquisitions. And when you have acquisitions, the product gets watered down. Why? Because people who are involved in the decisioning process aren't there for you. They're selves. Why? Because they're only looking at the profit margin. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you are looking for some STEM content, check out my second channel known as the QCIS channel, where information like this is going to be on my secondary channel, where I can give you all of the chemical compounds. In fact, you want to understand about reading a label, go back to previous videos I've done on reading labels and food service on the QCIS channel. Well, on that channel, I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, here's where you can find me. Right here on the 411 Talk Zone radio show, my main channel. You can find me right here on YouTube, find me on X, formerly Twitter, and also find me on Rumble. And you can find me on Truth Social, and of course, for the QCIS channel. You can find me right here on YouTube. You can find me on X, formerly Twitter, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. Now, once again, when we dealt with this video, so you'll know, copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, research. Fair use is a use permitted by the copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. So nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So in other words, the video that I presented to you tonight was under the copyright section 107, the Copyright Act of 1976. And I will put that in my comment section as well. And So you understand, you want life, liberty, and happiness. Here's what you need to do. Be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. If the shoe fits, wear it. And if you don't like the shoe, then change it. And once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening. God bless you. I'm out.